Okay, so first of all, why people do staking, right? This is because in a proof of stake world, in order to make sure the network is secure, either you run your own validator or you delegate it to someone like us, who manages the tech side. But because you have chosen someone to do the work, the network itself rewards you of a block reward. So that's where the yield comes to you, and also part of the transaction fees that happened on the blockchain also goes to the token holders. Yeah. So
Hmm.
this is actually the first ever crypto native yield that happens. Yeah. So because you have staked, that's why the block reward and transaction fees goes to you.
This video is sponsored by Sons. Sons are a men's healthcare brand that offer clinically proven, licensed hair loss treatment for less than the cost of a coffee every day. Follow the link in the description and use the code KickoffSessions40 to avail of 40% off your first order. All right, let's kick off. And I'm very excited to be recording with you today. Close contact for the last couple of weeks, and it's interesting because the area in crypto, I think, is getting more and more important. And as markets are changing in dynamics, it's like the companies with a great use case and with a great business plan are going to really succeed over the next 24 months. It's like a startup world. So looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, thank you, Darren, for having me here. We all
Mm-hmm.
started, just chatting on LinkedIn, and it turns out to be a podcast. Really
Mm-hmm.
excited about it. Yeah, how you're touching various topics and getting into interesting discussions. So hopefully, yeah, I can contribute to that.
Of course, of course. And you've got a deep background as well in tech consulting and in crypto. So it's going to be interesting. So I want to kind of start even in that kind of crypto space. So what does even the world of crypto mean to yourself? As in why did you move into this area? And really what do you think of the kind of whole ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, so to me, crypto is kind of already like a lifestyle, right? So it's kind of a statement of how we see the world is organized, because crypto is actually more than just the technology. It's about how you find, like-minded people, and those guys could be you just across the continents and you've never met, but somehow you organize those with those people and you do stuff that are interesting and also could be long-lasting, impactful for the future, right? So
Mm.
I got into crypto kind of by accident, but also kind of it's also like a destiny. So I did my degrees in engineering. Uh, However, when I started my career, I never practiced engineering because I got into consulting, more specifically strategy consulting, right? So it's less about quantitative stuff, but we're more thinking about strategic issues, etc. Um, I got into that because I thought, okay, I've spent years, solving math or other types of analytical issues, but it could be interesting, to look at business as another type of analytical problems where things are less certain. There are things that you can never quantify. So I kind
Mm-hmm.
of took that challenge before I left school. Um, Also, that was because I was back then in US doing my master's degree. And in Boston, there was a huge consulting culture. A lot of consulting firms are based over there. That's why I had my own team. We took part in a few case competitions, and it turns out that we did it pretty well. So it
Mm-hmm.
comes with prizes, with business cards from different companies. So that's why I thought, okay, maybe this is something that I could do for a living. So did that for a couple of years. Spent this amount of time, talking to central banks in Southeast Asia and also telco operators in Southeast Asia. So that's where the role of technology really emerges, right? So we're talking about, okay, in Southeast Asia, it's really expensive to manage cash, and also it's hard to set up a bank branches. So, however, the telco coverage is actually pretty decent. We're talking about 95% and above. So, is there a way that we can just lead people forward without going to branches and do everything on mobile phone? So that's where I started to see the power of technology, and that was really really interesting to me. Then in 2017, where some of my ex roommates, we're really big, we're good pals, and they came to me saying like, "Hey, Zhuling, you should stop looking at business plans. You should look at white papers." So before that, I had no idea what crypto is, but those guys just keep on nagging, beside my ear. I think that's what we're doing here as well, right? We talk about those things, and people may be interested. So that's how I got really interested in this. Yeah, particularly, for crypto, people talk about consensus. This is how I see that, in the past, there are different ways of organizing people or how we group ourselves, right? So historically, it's about geographical location. We group ourselves because we're in the same location. That's how, nation state forms. After that, it's companies start to organize us, right? So we kind of label ourselves, hey, I'm working for this company. And, those companies could be cross countries, but still, we feel that we are related with those people and we're organized to do work. So there is, besides geographical, there is a kind of like an equity or like a company layer. But what crypto is really interesting right now is that we're setting another layer where we are all more like value. We identify ourselves by the values we believe in. That's where the consensus comes in. And and we're definitely much more scattered in terms of location, and also we're not bounded, in a legal entity. So for me back then in 2017, that was something very interesting to me. I think I sense there's something interesting coming out of it. Yeah, and also, if we think about internet in the past, it's really about creating information very easily and transmitting and replicating information at almost zero cost and super fast, right? So that's what internet is about. But what crypto is doing here is that we're trying to making sure the ownership of valuable information or valuable assets on a blockchain that is secure, and also this can be moved across continents really fast. So in this case, we're really talking about an internet that safeguards value instead of just information. So again, for me to look at this, I think this is really opening up new doors to internet business, which I'm very excited about. Yeah, that's why I just got into crypto in 17, full time. Yeah, so far no regrets.
And you get more and more interested in it. Yeah, it's interesting because like even going back to the original part there about like your background in engineering, it's funny because I feel like you take that very problem solving approach. You look at an issue, you break it down. That's the engineering kind of a background. And it's funny when you bring it into a business context, and it's why I feel like a lot of people that do different types of engineering are very successful in that space, because they look at the problem statement and they can break it down. Touching a great point around Southeast Asia, because I feel like that there's a disparity between like access to banks, access to information, access to funds, and therefore it's maybe evolved at a different stage than Europe and the US. Now the US infrastructure also isn't fantastic, but even compared to Europe, so it's interesting to see how like crypto can tap into those markets and avail of it. Now there is different infrastructure layers of difficulty and of challenges, but in terms of like value and ownership, I feel like that's kind of like getting into the right path. And especially, as we look at cross border is a good point. So cross border geography, and if we look at company, how we kind of resonate towards companies, there's that big element of ownership. I work for Apple, I work for Microsoft. Whereas in the crypto space, it kind of seems like that we're trying to get to a state whereby we don't actually have those ties, those kind of traditional ties, which is what's even appealing to me. So you can be someone in Southeast Asia that didn't necessarily have a bank account, but you have access to crypto, and we can get you that access. Now, you still need a mobile, you still need access like this, but it's good to see that from that perspective. And I suppose what would be your thoughts on that as well, in terms of like ownership towards an asset? Like, how do you kind of think about it? Because I suppose you've been in the US, you're in Singapore, there's multiple currencies, and there's multiple different
Right.
kind of political statements going on at the same time.
Yeah, so I think ownership is really important, right? It's something that uh, motivates us actually, or this is like the fundamental for us why we're fighting for a good living and also whatever we possess.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I think since that the whole world we're more transitioning into like more virtual. In the past, we never thought, hey, maybe a gaming account could cost that much, right? Or we would consider that as an asset. Uh, but in fact, those things are really happening. We're talking about an NFT, or we're talking about, even could be a domain name, right? So the definition of asset has definitely grown, and the traditional way of having a registry somewhere legally binding, I mean, it's still working. Yeah. However, this is a quite legacy system that may not be sufficient for the digital life. That's why blockchain kind of just take that problem like uh, upfront, yeah,
Hmm.
and just with this technology, it indeed has made ownership very clear, and also the transaction of ownership or exchange of ownership efficient and hassle free. So yeah, I think this is something very it's something definitely revolutionary, right? And of
Hmm.
course, when we first talk about crypto or blockchain, I think the best example to show how ownership are preserved uh, is Bitcoin. Yeah, because from our
Hmm.
perspective, Bitcoin is the digital gold. This is something that in the old time, if a lot of people like to collect gold, but it's really hard to carry them. Uh,
Hmm.
but for Bitcoin, it's very easy as long as you keep your private key safe. But of course, how to make private key stored securely is another discussion, and of course that requires a lot of technical advancement as well. This is something we're working on for key management as part of RockX. But I think just storing BTC is much more efficient and easier compared to you have to carry some jewels or gold
Or
with you,
diamonds as well.
or
Traditionally,
diamonds. Yeah.
yeah. If you've
Hmm.
ever listened to the Bitcoin Standard or read the book, should I say? Um, I listened to the audio book, and it's very interesting on that area because when central banks are devaluing currency and they're printing more money and there's more monetary policy, that's like this the argument towards Bitcoin is the fact that it's not like gold whereby we can produce well even gold we can make more, or even diamonds for instance we can just change the valuation of it. It's dependent
Hmm.
on sentiment. It's the fact that this is kind of backed by no one. It's completely centralized, and as a fact of
Yeah.
that, therefore there's no intervention. And I think there's just more and more of an argument towards this when we see inflation numbers at nearly 10% in Europe. I'm not too sure how they are in Singapore at the moment, but I have seen that they're also been increasing. So it's kind of more
Hmm.
of like a structural change overall, because when we look at like regular economic systems, the Keynesian approach of monetary policy, quantitative easing and whatnot, well, it has fractures and it has been breaking, and there is a lot of arguments to say that it is breaking down quite now. It's very self-evident. So the fact that we do have this new source of ownership, source of typical currency that is even worked on an area of proof of work, which we'll get into in details, which comes with its limitations, it's still much more like sufficient than having a company or government back it and potentially leading to many issues. Because it's
Hmm.
kind of removes that ambiguity, removes the bureaucracy element of it.
Yeah, indeed, right? So Bitcoin is not backed by a single entity, um, and also, it's not backed by any names behind it, right? So
Mhm.
nobody knows who is Satoshi in this case. The beauty of Bitcoin actually is that there are three types of people in the whole ecosystem. So you have the miners who operates the network, yeah, and
Mhm.
you also have the coders that making sure the software is running as planned. Then you have the token holders that are using it, And surprisingly, these three parties are also quite separated. Yeah. So there's no like party says that, okay, hey, I have the full control of the whole network. And also it's free. It's permissionless to become any part of those three parties. So yeah, so from my perspective, this is really the beauty of Bitcoin.
hmm And even one thing that actually to discuss there as well is around like the miners process. So one kind of caveat and one kind of criticism is that proof of work element, that basically we need a scenario whereby people need to put towards transactions to be validated in there. And usually kind of Bitcoin favors the larger miners, which is could be the mining farms, which could have been based in Asia or based in um the US. So it's probably a good idea
Yep.
to even discuss like that consensus mechanism of proof of work, even from your own perspective, like what's kind of proof of work to you, and consequently, how have you moved into proof of stake? So I think that's an interesting dilemma to see where crypto was, and I suppose where crypto's going next, and potentially what could be the next, not necessarily opportunity, but the most viable kind of path towards something that's sustainable.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. When so basically, because Bitcoin is a storage of value, so from my perspective, it's not really a payment currency. So it's
Mhm.
really about storage of value. So that having that said, so this means that we need to make sure that hurting that reputation of storage of value is gonna come at a high cost. Um, so this is
Mhm.
why proof of work, at least so far, is still the best option for Bitcoin. Why is that so? Because this really just makes sure that, okay, if a newcomer comes in and who wants to mess up the whole registry, so basically Bitcoin network is the registry of ownership. Yeah, it really costs like billions of dollars. So this is sensible, right? So because this involves consuming energy, and this involves buying a lot of machines, and
Mhm.
machines are also limited in supply. Therefore, it's really hard to do so. I think this is a uh, essential cost to maintain the network. Just
Yep.
like if we're in a cash economy, just making sure the cash are sent to the right place and there's no counterfeit, and printing those cash fiat. That's already, we never really talk about it. But actually, that also costs a lot of money. Yeah.
Mhm.
But of course, then people do comment on, look, there are only like top 10 mining pools in Bitcoin that probably controls like the majority of the hash power. Um, yeah. So mm, I think yes or no. So there is a concern of centralization. Um,
Mhm.
but if you think about it, Bitcoin is only 10 years old, right? Or okay, now it's like more than 10 years old, but still
Mhm.
it's a very new invention. Uh, However, there's no way of preventing the network itself to have more mining pools. And also, the concept of mining pool is in fact to make sure the reward has been smoothed out to every single miner, whether this is a big one or it's a small one. Yeah, without a mining pool, because the rewards are random and sporadic, that's
Yep.
why sometimes the smaller ones may not be able to get rewarded before they run out of cash. So mining pools, in fact, smooth that out. So I think, in this perspective, the mining pools are helping the smaller ones to reach a more viable economy.
And is that
And
still happening in the proof of work concept, consensus? So you have mining pools still in proof of work, and even smaller miners can still be put forward, even though they've already committed their energy and committed their physical energy as well as their actual electrical energy, and then they will still be rewarded for committing towards that pool. Is that correct?
that's right. Yeah. So that's
Interesting.
still happening in proof of work. Yeah, and also again, as a miner, you are also free to move from one mining pool to another one. Yeah, so there's no string attached. So that's also, if someone on the mining pool level wants to do something that is not really, good for the ecosystem, people can very easily just move to another one. So there is, a very fluid dynamics that makes none of those parties incentivized to be more centralized.
Makes sense. So the big issue here, or the big kind of consideration, is obviously the energy consumption. And the Bitcoin maxi will say that the energy equates to the same as your washing machine. So if we're in Singapore and we all have our washing machine on, it's still the same effect. So you could turn off your washing machine and it would be fine. What's your kind of thoughts on this element? Is the energy justified to a degree, because we have this store of wealth, and people have this opportunity whereby they could store their own value? Or is it unjust, and then therefore we're looking at a scenario whereby proof of stake is more viable in these scenarios?
Yeah. Okay, maybe let me separate that one a little bit. Yeah. So let's first talk
Yeah.
about because that's a very complex topic. So for Bitcoin itself, or for any other types of tokens that wants to be a storage of value, I think the best security mechanism is still proof of work. You do need to have a running cost that is at least sufficient, to prevent any wrongdoings. Because this is the barrier to ensure that the whole network is secure. Of course, we have no perfect answer to say, what is the right level of energy consumption. Yeah, Bitcoin itself is just, increasing in terms of total energy consumption, but this is due to adoption and also, how the whole market has grown. However, I think it'll be also interesting to take a look at, what is the percentage of renewable energy used in this space. Because, as at least, back in, so in China, at least previously, most of the mining hash power were concentrated in a region where it's mostly hydraulic power. So people are actually using excessive electricity that nobody else is using, because those are really rural areas. Plenty of river, but no one was really living there. So they built those power plants to power Bitcoin. So in this case, is this really like consume energy that can be used elsewhere economically? I'm not so sure. Yeah, and I also think that in other countries, because Bitcoin mining is very decentralized right now globally, so definitely people are favoring renewable energy. Yeah, so for me, I don't see there is a need for Bitcoin to move to proof of stake, because theoretically this may not play in favor, to make Bitcoin more secure. However, from my perspective, blockchain is more than just storage of value. Blockchain is something that would merge into internet, right? So with the help of smart contract, blockchain can do way more things than storage of value. So here we're talking about programmable, payment. We're talking about, other types of applications, whether this is NFT or this is DeFi. Yeah. So all those ones, they need much faster transaction speed, and also these are the ones that probably need more of a business-like of consensus. So those ones probably works better with proof of stake, because in this case you do not need the energy consumption to ensure the network security. Here you're relying on the token holders and also staking providers like us, to making sure the security of the network. I think right now this probably is the most viable solution to meet in terms of efficiency and also effectiveness of the whole network. Therefore, Ethereum is moving from POW to POS. Yeah, and we think this is definitely a very reasonable move.
Yeah, I get you, because we have that area whereby we can build applications on it, and it's much more useful. There's much more use as a result of being able to move away from just proof of work. I suppose like the argument from that from a proof of work state is, oh, we lose the element of decentralization when it's held by like a company. Let's say if it is
Mhm.
Ethereum, and as a result, then it is the developers who make the decisions, and they can change things. They can manipulate the coins. They can manipulate how the code works. What's your kind of thoughts around that? Like, do we lose the element of the kind of original thesis around Bitcoin and crypto, that it's completely decentralized, or is there a trade-off here whereby we get so much more out of it? So proof of stake, we obviously have the efficiency, we have the transaction speed, especially with Solana and whatnot. But now we're able to really go much quicker. So
Mhm.
is there a trade-off that has to be made potentially?
Um, yeah, so definitely there is a trade-off, to make. Uh, First of all, even within proof of stake, there are different ways to design it. For Ethereum, uh, they're still promoting, as many validators as possible, even for smaller
Mm,
ones. That's why every 32 ETH uh, is eligible to become a validator, right? So now we're talking about hundreds of thousands of ETH 2.0 validators globally. Yeah. So in this way, uh, it still allows like hobbyists or small token holders to become a validator. Yeah.
mhm,
So in this way, I think they're still trying to maintain to keep that permissionless feature in the whole network.
mhm,
Of course, there are other blockchains that has much less validators. Naturally, maybe favor a bit more of like the big token holders. Um, but yes, theoretically there are some risks of them, being too prominent or influential.
mhm,
However, we also need to recognize that these are the people that has the highest stake, associated with the success of the network. That's
mhm,
why we have seen those people actually getting more involved in tech building, community building, and even in the governance part.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it makes sense as well, just from like a corporate structure perspective. If you zoomed out and looked at it from a governance perspective, the larger holders, have an increase in influence naturally. But it kind of,
mhm,
to me, there's kind of like a deeper philosophical question as to, does that kind of intervene with the overall thesis that every individual player should be treated at the same level? But again, obviously there's a scalar too, because if you have someone who has 4 ETH, and then in comparison someone has 400 ETH, of course it's different. There's different changes. But for me, there seems to be just a question in terms of, for staking, for instance, like if there's a minimum you can
mhm,
stake, and some platforms might have 200 or 300 ETH. At that point, do we create this kind of like a gated community, such that only certain
mhm.
people can enter, and then therefore it debunks the whole theory that, oh, we do have this new currency or this new token that everyone can be involved with? It's just more of a philosophical question versus a theoretical and practical question.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. This kind of also goes into what is fair, right? What is
Yeah.
fair, in a society. Um, I think there are very. This is really philosophical. So I don't think there's any clear answer to that. Uh, but the general thinking here is that, from my perspective, a blockchain is actually doing a lot of social experiments to test out what could be a fair model. So,
Mhm,
the different blockchains we have talked about, Ethereum, Solana, even Polkadot, and so on, each of them are having a different way of how to, attach the rights or the governance rights with token holders. Some are doing it proportionally, but most of them are not really doing so. So they
mhm,
do recognize that, look, if you have a higher stake, yes, you have higher governance votes.
mhm,
However, it does not necessarily have to be linear. Yeah, so they also try to do a cap um, for the large token holders. So this is something that we're also very interested to look at. how this will play out. Because essentially each blockchain is really doing a social experiment on the governance side. Governance was only more actively talked about since proof of stake. Yeah, in proof of work world, it was not really that much discussed.
Yeah,
So at least having that discussion started is already a good step forward.
And for me as well, it seems like that with every evolution or with every kind of big event, it could have been even like hacks like Mount Gox or whatnot. There's like a correction and a learning. There's like a learning that's happening in the ecosystem, and it's either a harsh learning, like a Terra Luna scenario, and then
Right.
people come out with a new kind of, not necessarily theory, but with much more information as to, okay, things should be looked like this and things should not be, taken out of context, whatnot. So that's why I kind of get a bit more confidence, oddly enough, in the whole industry as things rebound and as things come back, because you have people like yourself who are obviously in the weeds and working really hard to produce really good products, but at the same time, you're picking the best out of past events, which is how things get more creative and get better over time.
Yeah, so like some of the points you have talked about, okay, there is still a minimum amount to stake, or it could be that, okay, the smaller token holders are not really, their voice are not heard out. So these are the kind of things that as a validator service, we do keep that in mind. So by doing a public node where we allow anyone to stake on it, so in this case, they do not have to individually meet the minimum requirement of running a node. And also, we do listen to the community and try to voice out based on what we think is it's needed in the community. So there are many things that has been ongoing in the staking world, and a lot of people are also building public good infrastructures. So, for example, we are taking the stance that we want to make sure that anyone could have a free access point with blockchain, so they can interact with the blockchain and look at blockchain data. That's why we just launched it as a portal on our website, so anyone can just get a free access node. There are other people working on DAO and governance tools, so people can be more efficient and easier to organize and reach decisions collectively. So yeah, I think we're in a industry where it's like Lego. Different pieces are coming together.
Yeah, of course. Let's go a little bit deeper into staking as a whole. So I know we've delved into it, but for me, going back to the original idea, so I think that my whole thesis on this has changed over time. I will completely admit that. At first, I had my skepticism, and then I was going through all the different emotions as time goes on. But as time has progressed, I suppose one thing that I've really began to understand is more like the long-term value. And then because you think more long-term, there's obviously you don't receive short-term reward or short-term drawdowns or whatnot. So let's say contrasted towards a business, you would have monthly recurring revenue, or real estate's a really good example. You would have that cash flow that's coming in. So to me, staking solves that whole issue, because if you truly think for the long term and if you are not scared about short-term events, this looks like the most viable path towards longevity. It's kind of my kind of thesis on it. So can you maybe talk more about like staking as a whole, how it functions, and what are some of the main use cases around it?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so first of all, why people do staking, right? This is because in a proof of stake world, in order to make sure the network is secure, either you run your own validator, or you delegate it to someone like us, who manages the tech side. But because you have chosen someone to do the work, the network itself rewards you of a block reward. So that's where the yield comes to you, and also part of the transaction fees that happened on the blockchain also goes to the token holders. Yeah. So this is actually the first ever crypto native yield that happens. Yeah. So because you have staked, that's why the block reward and transaction fees goes to you. Yeah. So if you look at the overall market, how do people get profit, right? So most people are looking at short-term trading profit.
Price goes up.
Yeah.
Price goes up
So
there.
this is one way, or another way is that you lend out your tokens. Yeah. So you get your interest out of it. Yeah. But the third one here is actually staking. And compared to trading and lending, where both of them requires you to constantly manage this, or you need a counterparty who trades with you or who lends or borrows from you. Staking is the one that does not require any of your actions. Yeah. So this is the beauty of it, right? And we like to say that, okay, with staking, basically we turn your crypto wallet from a current account into a savings account, because all of a sudden you start to have that yield. And this yield we're talking about, this is stable, and this is also sustainable because of the nature of network.
And one question on that is, so there is two ways to go about doing it, as you mentioned. So you can go through not necessarily a broker, but through like a platform like yourselves, which will stake on your behalf. And then there's self staking, I suppose, is that the word for it? But at that point, can your transactions be rejected and then you don't get the reward? Like, what's the benefit towards going through a platform versus doing it yourself? Or conversely, what's the cons for there as well?
Yeah. So first of all, in order to run your own validator, you do need to have the technical knowledge, right? You need to understand how to set up a node. You need to make sure that, okay, you have a powerful computer, or at least a server that runs 24/7. So the opportunity cost is that you can run your own validator, but you need to make sure that it runs 24/7, because every minute it's not working or it's done, then you will not be entitled to receive rewards during that period. So this is something that, like professional validators like us, we focus on 24/7 monitoring and making sure that the validators are always up online. And secondly, here is because quite a number of blockchains, they do need a minimum amount to become a validator. So sometimes, this could be above like 500K or even higher. So in this case, it's practically impossible for individual token holders to run a validator. But still, we don't want them to be excluded from receiving the staking rewards. That's why they decide to delegate to companies like us.
Makes sense. So looking at how that actual concept works. So when someone stakes, who determines the return from there? So there is the return you're given plus the fees, like the interim fees. How does that decided? Is that decided by the platform, and that's how it's given to the user?
So all those things are decided by the blockchain itself. So the blockchain itself does have they call it a staking yield. Ethereum right now is around 4 to 5%. Polkadot is around 14%. So that's decided by the blockchain team, and the transaction fees are basically determined by the actual activities on that blockchain. So neither of them are determined by us. So in this case, our role is really just to run these servers so that our token holders or our delegators are entitled to receive those rewards. And those rewards are never sent to us first. We do it in a non-custodial way, meaning that all those rewards go directly to our customers. And of course, we already applied a commission rate. So it could be 5% or 10%, and only that part goes to us. So the interesting part here is that, number one, we do not have access, or we never touch our clients' tokens. So that's for the best security. And number two, the rewards also go to them directly. We never touch that. And we like it this way because in this way, we can work with any companies. Think about it. We can even do a B2B2C model where we enable wallets to allow their customers to earn to do staking, or it could be even a bank. In the future, if their customers have tokens in their banks, and banks can just connect with us, and they will enjoy the yield.
Yeah, it's an awesome model. Like honestly, I think for me, out of everything that I've like been kind of studying and analyzing over the last couple of years, it's definitely the most like interesting. And I think there's so much more like opportunity for like one, that inclusion. It has that inclusion element. It has that revenue generating element, and it has that kind of ownership too. Because as you said, you don't touch like the tokens. You don't touch. You're like the custodian in the background, and then you just have like you're clearing the transactions essentially. One question that is obviously top of mind with this is security considerations.
Mhm.
So like you how can you ensure security within the staking pools, especially with some of the kind of hacks that are happening so actively? Um, is there ways you need to start thinking around like potential hackers and how they're going to hit these pools? Because I think it's interesting, because if you compare this to a hard wallet approach whereby I have BTC, I have 10 Bitcoin on my hard wallet. At that point, no one
Mhm.
can get to it. But it's the fact that, to me, staking pools look like, like a swimming pool of fish. Like anyone can come and just attack it and just get the reward. So
Mm.
how do you think about security?
Yeah. So let's take an example, right? So let's say for some reason a hacker got the private key of our validator. Yeah, and then he can do everything to our validator. He has the full control. So the first thing here is that this guy cannot move that 10, maybe that 10 ETH from your wallet. Why? Is because that 10 ETH are still remain in your wallet locked, and
Mhm.
only if the hacker knows your private key. But in this case, when you do staking with us, your private key you never give it to us. You only what you did is only you send a signal to the blockchain saying that, hey, I'm staking 10 ETH onto RockX validator, and that's all. Yeah, but there
Mhm.
is no transfer. So although we are a pool, but there was no tokens of our customers. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
why your part is safe. Yeah. So the worst thing that they can do to you is that they may just do they may want to just trigger a slash on the validator. So they want to do a double spending, and if it's detected by the network, then maybe 1 or 2% of your your tokens will get slashed as a punishment. Yeah. So this is like the most extreme situation where you will
Mhm.
get hurt, right? So for these kind of things, that's why we take very every single method to make sure that our validators will not be hacked. Yeah, so that involves a lot of things like encryptions, and also we're looking into using multi-party computation to cut our private key into pieces, so no one can ever get our full private key. Yeah,
Mhm.
and of course, we also offer a slash protection. So if anything happened uh, uh, because of us, we also cover the loss for our customers. And luckily, so far, we have never encountered any situation like that.
Mhm. And how does that compare to like liquidity pools that have been previously attacked? This is my like lack of
Mhm.
knowledge now. So other staking pools that I've researched, I forget even the names of them.
Yeah.
Some of them been targeted for 310 million, 80 million, and then held at
Mhm.
ransomware. So is there a difference there whereby they've committed beyond their private keys? No, well, it wouldn't involve the private keys, but how does a scenario happen whereby you lose everything? Because that's probably a big
Yeah.
concern of people, because they're saying, well, I'm locking this up. There's price as well. We'll discuss with that, but it's the element that I've locked it up and now it's at the mercy of someone attacking possibly.
Mhm. So right now in the market, staking is a term that has been used very loosely. Yeah, so there are in fact two types of staking. So the first type are just like us. It's only for proof of stake validation purpose, and we call it a non-custodial staking. So meaning that tokens never sent to a pool. It's just a delegation. Yeah. So in this case, principal is always safe. So all the hacks that happened are associated with a second type of staking. That's where you do need to send all your tokens to a smart contract. And then the smart contract deploys those assets, whether it's for trading or for lending, and earn you interest that way. Yeah, so that is the type of staking that is because all the tokens are in a smart contract. So if that smart contract get hacked, then of course people get burned out like really badly. That's something that that's a business we are not in. That's more in the DeFi space, and we do recommend people to take caution, in case they want to get into such a situation, because smart contracts are quite easy to have bugs, and you never know when that would happen.
Crazy. Would you say that's kind of version one, so that kind of approach towards staking, whereby people committed their tokens and then it gets kind of hashed or gets completely taken, should I say? Because to me that sounds like a problem that needs to be solved. If you go back to the original engineering issue, we have this problem whereby people can get at the network and take advantage of it. So we need to solve that way somehow. So how do you solve that problem? For not necessarily staking pools as such, but even your model, like that surely is the answer, or at least it sounds like the interim answer at least.
Yeah, so our model only solves the issue if those tokens are used to secure the network itself. Yeah, so also means that the rewards, the yield only comes from the network itself. However, if it's a product that aims for gaining yield from trading or from lending, because of the nature of trading and lending, you do need those tokens, to move around. Then, right, so far I have not really seen a good solution, to solve that. Right, it could probably comes with better auditing, and also some curation, on the protocols, maybe to give them some kind of like a security rating. Yeah, because just right now there are too many protocols, and people sometimes rush into those ones without doing research. That's why that's where the less secure protocols could get hacked, and with a lot of money.
Yeah, it's the proprietary systems that are most vulnerable in those areas, because they haven't been properly tested, really, if you think about it. They probably have to a certain degree, but real stress testing would find those cracks after a while. And the valuations that are within that kind of price just seems bonkers in terms of course, they're like, it's like low-hanging fruits, it's just like the easiest thing to tackle, which I think is one big kind of consideration people need to have. The other consideration is around the price volatility, price stability element of it. So going back to the original problem statement, for me, I don't envision a point whereby I would want to like reclaim like crypto in the next couple of months or years or whatever. So that's the thesis for why you would go long term. But I think the fact that some of these altcoins, even Polkadot in particular, which I think I looked at my phone recently, it was down like 40%. Even things like this can mean that you lose pretty much all your investment, or you go through these huge cycles. So when you commit tokens, are you committing to that price? So let's say Ethereum is based at 2000 USD. If you're getting a 10% yield, I know it wouldn't be like that, but if you are getting a 10% yield, it's 2000 and you make 200. Does that mean if Ethereum went to, let's say, 800, would you only make 80 in that scenario? Like, does your yield adjust based on price or the lockup price?
Yeah, so the yield are actually given in the form of the native token itself. Yeah, so basically, if Ethereum goes down to 80 to 800, yeah, so your yield is only 80, right? And this is because when we talk about staking yield here, this is crypto native. That's why in dollar values, yes, there is a price volatility. That's why I don't think everyone will go for staking. Staking is mostly for people. Number one, they have done a little bit of allocation just to acquire tokens, and they're looking into this more for long term, right? So they say, okay, maybe I just want to hold it for 6 months or even like 2 years, or okay, maybe this could be a gift for my daughter or for my son, before goes to college. So I'm putting this for like 5 years. So that's where it makes sense, because you're not going to check the price chart every day, and you just want, it's okay for you to get an additional 10 to 20% every year. But if it's a trader or someone who does cares about the liquidity of the tokens, no, staking is not really suitable in this case, because they will lose the liquidity during that period.
Yeah, it's fascinating because there's always just so much different like emotional elements that are happening. It's like not even price go up theory. There's always just the other aspects of things happening, which is the nature of markets. You know what I mean? When markets are good and everyone's behind like a bull run, we see people jumping in at 68K, 69K for Bitcoin at that period, and then people kind of run out the door. So there's always that debate. For the last 5 minutes, I wanted to just ask you in relation to careers, especially crypto careers. So for young people like myself, 26 years old, sometimes it's difficult to see what the opportunity is in crypto from a career perspective. What would you advise for young people, especially even for yourself, who want to move into the space?
Yeah, if we're talking about career advice back in like 17 or 18, it's really hard to tell, because the whole industry was not that clear in terms of where it is heading. But if you look at the crypto market right now, or the whole industry right now, I think it's very similar to fintech and internet industry. Yeah, so each team right now is trying to build up a very decent team. They need people who are in the sales side, in the marketing side, in the tech side, and also in the product side. Yeah, so also the product designing cycles are very similar to internet companies. So definitely there are plenty of opportunities, and also luckily there are sufficient fundings and like angel investors who are looking to fund young entrepreneurs. So I think for people who are interested to get into this space, yeah, it's really no difference from sending CVs to a I don't know, to a Revolut or to Grab or Uber. Yeah, but of course, getting into this space does comes with a little bit of mental stress, because of somehow it's related to the market. Yeah, so you do need to know what you've signed up for, and plus, a lot of teams in the space are quite distributed. So meaning that people work remotely. Yeah, so this also involves a lot of time zone difference. It could also be that you have to make phone calls. Yeah, so you do need to sometimes make phone calls at night or in different like inconvenient times. But other than that, it's pretty much it.
You just gotta make it work.
For us, yeah, you just gotta make it work, right? But that's normal startup life. At RockX, right now we're actively looking for product person. So we want people who can come up with like really innovative products, our data service and our staking service. Yeah, so if there are some people who you think are good, we're definitely here to talk to them.
As always. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. I know I'd love to go a little longer, and even when I get to Singapore, we should record a session all around this as well. Would be very, very impressive. I appreciate it.